Okay, are you ready for Robo Lounge? We have the great pleasure of having Rolf Pfeifer coming all the way from Osaka University, and also Matthias Clostermann coming from Spain to give a show. Robo Lounge it's called, and it's I think I'm not saying too much if I say it's a show, right, Matthias?
Well, of sorts, yes.
Yes, yes. So it's not a scientific presentation as we have seen during the day. It is to some extent. It's a mixture.
It's a mixture of both. Oh, that sounds better.
That's good. Great. Thank you very much, and we are looking forward to seeing Robo Lounge.
All right, well, thank you very much for having us here. As we were already introduced, this is Dr. Rolf Pfeifer, quite known as one of the most prominent people in soft robotics.
And this is Matthias Clostermann. Is the sound on?
Yes, maybe
Yeah,
they want
on.
to.
Yeah. And this is Matthias Clostermann, one of the world's top entertainment designers.
Thanks. So we're going to talk to you today about the Robo Lounge, but maybe you're hearing some different stories in the media, but one of the things that we want to talk about today is that robotics in 2016 actually has a problem. And it's probably a big problem. Now let's just hear some people talk about it.
How do you imagine a robot in the future?
I imagine them to be like in Will Smith's iRobot movie, and then they'll take over the world.
I see robots in the future human-like, actually, because I think humans try to create themselves as machines. So that's exactly how I see robots.
It should be intelligent, and it should make decisions itself.
It fears me, but I think they will look like us.
I think robots in the future will be very common in everyday life, like you meet them in a bus or something like this.
There is a robotic hype. Robots have been around for more than half a century, and they have been doing their work for us behind factory walls. And we wouldn't have all the nice things that we like and love, like mobile phones, laptop computers, motorbikes, hi-fis, entertainment electronics, if it weren't for these robots that have been doing the work for us around the clock. But because they were hidden behind factory walls, the general public was not aware of the presence of these robots until in December 2013, this message went through all the media worldwide like a lightning. Google buys 8 robotics companies in 6 months. Now, if Google does something, there must be something important to it. And mind you, Google started, among other things, by buying the company Boston Dynamics, that you all know, and you all know the scary robots, you know, the big dog robot, the Atlas robot. And since then, the robots have been in all the media, not only technological media, but everyday media and economic media. Here is an issue of The Economist from March 2014, exclusively dedicated to the rise of the robots. And what you can see here, the way they picture the robots is really corresponding to the imagination of people. You know, this robot, you know, holding the little kitty by the hand, the robot feeding the old lady, and so on. So, and I mean, the media are now, you cannot open or look at any web page in the media without finding a report on robots. And also this meeting here, I think, testifies to the robot hype. If you look at the financial side of things, it's enormous how the investments in robotics have actually grown. Let me just pick out 2 figures. Or if you look at 2015, it's almost $1 billion that has been invested in robots. And the important figure is this means an 170% increase of investments over 2014. 170% in 1 year. So, you know, things are really moving. And also, some of you may have seen, you know, the KUKA shares have skyrocketed. Maybe they're a little down again, but some Chinese companies, you know, making a bid, Midea making a bid to buy KUKA, which made the KUKA shares skyrocket. So robots, you know, is really there, and it's really, really important.
But what if actually all of that is in danger? What if maybe in this big equation that many people made and where they've been betting a lot of millions on, what if there was some part missing that they didn't quite regard? Could that be? Well, you know, consumer robotics, and we are referring mainly to consumer robotics here, is actually different. When you look at the papers like Financial Times and all of these publications, whether it's online or offline, they always call the rise of the robotics the 4th industrial revolution of this century. Now, mind you, the first 3 revolutions were the PC, the internet, and mobile. But they were slightly different from robots. Why? Because these revolutions were happening basically on an expectation-free ground. Nobody had any clue what to expect from a PC. Nobody had any idea what the internet would develop like. And nobody really had a specific expectation towards mobile communication. However, the public has had a very clear image in mind of what they see as robots for almost 100 years. And all of you here, all of us here, we're robotic specialists in a way, so we might define robotics different. But in the public image, there is a very clear image. Now, imagine one thing. Imagine that someone would have given the crowds out there, the public, 40 years ago, when they first started to have these mobile phones that were as big as a suitcase, that were 20 kilos, and their net coverage was roughly 2 meters in each direction, and they cost thousands and thousands of euros. What if someone would have told them they would be getting an iPhone? They would probably have been very disappointed back then. And we can argue that we probably might not have all of our smartphones today if the public would have been disappointed at that early stage, right? So industrial robots, they're developing fantastic, but again, they're not really in the focus of the consumer. Again, they might even spark fears and job losses. But the consumer, when he speaks about a robot, he wants to have a sustainable benefit, he wants to have comfort and convenience, and he wants his expectations fulfilled. Now let me briefly go over some of the things that shaped expectations. This is an image from 1929, Fritz Lang's masterpiece, Metropolis. And already then, people had a very, very clear idea of what they see a robot, you know? And this was a human, she could walk around, she did all sorts of funny things. Later on, many iconic robots were going all through our world, and you've heard those people in the first interview, which were basically street interviews. We had different camera teams interview random people and ask them, well, what do you imagine a robot like? And they were imagining things they mostly knew from the movies. And those are the expectations that people have when they read The Rise of the Robots. And all these beautiful films, or the not so beautiful films, or the cute films, they shaped something that is very hard to get out of people's minds. And these robots have a couple of things in common that we just want to briefly look at. All of them have a perfectly polished and finished look. They're absolutely designed products. Each of them has a clear character and they're fully autonomous. Mostly they are humanoid. They emulate living beings and they're very multifaceted personal characters. They all have locomotion and object manipulation. They can grab things, they can serve you, they can give you things, and they can walk around. They can even jump off buildings, as we've seen. They function perfectly. I haven't really seen a film where those robots break down and get shaky and have all kinds of things. And in most tasks, they are superior to humans. They're faster, stronger, more agile. There has been a study of the University of Plymouth, or Plymouth, I think it's pronounced.
Plymouth, yeah.
And they asked 400 random people on their expectation what a robot should do for them. I mean, this was UK, so funny enough, the #1 task was make tea for me. I guess that's very British. But the other tasks were do my laundry, clean my house, do the schoolwork for me, walk my kids to the kindergarten. So, as you all are from the robotics, you certainly understand that this is something quite difficult to do.
Okay, now, given these expectations, let's now look at the reality of consumer robotics in 2016. Now, let me reiterate that robotics, from a technological and engineering perspective, is a fantastic field, and there are enormous achievements. So the field of robotics is thriving. What we're talking about here is what people see, in the media, in everyday life. Now, this is from a restaurant in China, in Hefei, big city in China. And if you look at these robots, these are waiter robots, waiter between quotation marks. They basically are like garbage bins on wheels. And they have a tray, and then the human personnel in the restaurant, they place the food and the drinks on the tray. The robots have the number of the table, they follow the black line until they reach the table, and then the customers actually take the food from the trays. So these robots have virtually no sensory motor capabilities, which is also why, and I think many of you read that, it was headlines, that 2 of the restaurants in China that had these kinds of robots had to close down again because they had insufficient sensory motor manipulation and locomotion abilities. Another restaurant just threw out the robot waiters and continued without the robot waiters. Well, that's the reality of what we see, what people see today. Now compare that to the expectations. Let me give you another example. Now here is the Pepper robot that we all know and love. And this is from a visit in Harajuku in Tokyo in November 2015. So Nestlé's, you know, everybody knows Nestlé's. It's a Swiss company, and they bought, I think, 1,000 of these Pepper robots in Japan, and they act as receptionists and as sales personnel. So basically people come in, they greet them, and then they can inform them on the products, on the Nestlé's products and Nespresso machines and what have you. And if you look at these, this little girl there in the middle, it's interacting with the Pepper robot. Pepper robot can also speak, can understand speech, but mostly these girls, they're interacting with the robot through the touch screen. I'm also interacting with the robot here, and it's nice. I mean, you know, it's cute, it's pleasant, it's a pleasure to interact with the robot. But after about a session of about 10 minutes, you think you've seen it. It can talk, it can give you valuable information about Nestlé's products, but it cannot make you coffee. And you know, if you think about what people want from robots, they want them to make tea, or here people will probably say they should be able to make coffee. Pepper cannot make coffee because it doesn't have sensory motor abilities. Okay, so let me briefly summarize what I said about what, you know, the robotics revolution in 2016, what you actually see. So they have this, typically they have this children's toy look, and you know, if you look around here at the exhibition, you also see many that have these very cute children toys look. They mostly have very limited abilities, especially very limited sensory motor abilities. Some of them have okay social interaction abilities like Pepper, but they have very, very limited sensory motor manipulation abilities. And there is a good reason for that, because that's actually very difficult to do, and it's also very expensive to put on the robots. Often they're remote controlled. Now, even though, like, you know, many drones, for example, they're remote controlled, so they're in that sense not really robots, or not, at least not autonomous robots, but people call them, or the companies call them robots because it sounds sexy, and they can basically get into this robotic hype by calling them robots. Full-featured humanoid robots with human abilities are nowhere near in sight. I mean, all the robots, humanoid robots that we have today, including the Atlas robot, nowhere near match the abilities of a human. Think of a waiter, you know, in this robot restaurant. What waiters can do, you know, waiters, they can carry a tray, they can pour drinks, they can carry the tray through masses of people, they can take orders, they can scream, you know, they can do all sorts of things simultaneously. There is no robot in sight that can do that. And as I said before, movement and locomotion abilities are limited. Now, I think we, as scientists and engineers, we do have a responsibility. Now, again, I'm not saying robotics is a bad field. I have been in robotics for almost 30 years. I love the field of robotics. I think we have achieved great things in robotics. It's the way that's being communicated about robotics which is the problem, not robotics itself. So from a scientific and engineering standpoint, robotics has achieved amazing results in companies and in universities. And a hype and the goals that we have are not bad in themselves. It's only bad if they are not fulfilled, because then people get frustrated. I said, well, where are these robots? I want these robots now. There's also the emotionality of the topic. First of all, robots or humanoid, they're a bit like humans, or people want them to be. You saw that in the movie. People want them to be like humans. And also, they're very emotional because we have these expectations from the movie. And I think these expectations have been poorly managed. I think by the scientists, by the engineers, by the companies, but also by the media. And this poor management of the emotionality of the expectation is starting to backfire. Now, some of the robotic projects that were, big announcements, they did not materialize. Some of the, companies, brilliant companies like Willow Garage, were closed down. Google, or Alphabet, as it's called now, they are trying to get rid of Boston Dynamics. Well, why are they trying to get rid of Boston Dynamics? Well, I think they're trying to get out of the robotic business altogether. Very bad sign, because Boston Dynamics doesn't promise, in the opinion of Alphabet, doesn't promise to have consumer products in the short term. That's one thing. And the second thing, equally important, the public opinion is very negative about Boston Dynamics, because people see the big dog robot, they see the Atlas robot, and they say, wow, this is scary. We don't want these kinds of robots. And so Google wants to get rid of this company because they want to maintain their image as a good company, as a company for the people. Okay, let me just read the last statement here. So failing to deliver on the expectations of the broad public might lead to investments defaulting and funds drying up, even for very good companies. So we have to be careful, and I think we as scientists, but also the media, they do have a responsibility of properly communicating, well, the goals, but also the actual state of the art of robotics. So, what can we do?
How will it be in the future when we actually live with robots?
Do they have feelings?
Can robots hurt us? Will they really understand me? Will they take care of me when I'm old? Will they take our jobs away?
Can they see? Can they smell?
Will it be scary to interact with them?
Can I feel love for a robot?
Discover the future with a drink in my Robot. Erleben Sie die Zukunft mit einem Drink in meiner Robot. Prost, Cheers, Gambay, Salut, Chin Chin, Santé, na zdrowie, Kampai.
So, what have you just seen? What you've just seen is just a brief trailer-like vision of the Robo-Lounge. Now, what is that Robo-Lounge? The Robo-Lounge is all about interaction and a real-life experience. What we are looking at here is giving the public an interaction with an actual robotic service in a public setting, which means it's not hidden behind closed doors, it's actually open, it's not a museum, it's a bar, right? And it's a very simple thing to go to a bar, to have a drink, to meet your friends, but to do that in a publicly visible environment that is an everyday situation of life. And because it's publicly visible and because those robots will look and act a lot more like those robots people know from the movies, it does actually partially fulfill the promise of the hype. So in order to achieve that, we're looking at a full family of robots, androids, like we know from Hiroshi Ishiguro, drone waiters, robotic bartenders, security, and what have you. Let me just briefly introduce you to some of the ideas. Now those images here, they're far from being specific designs. They're at first artist impressions just to get the concept across, but how would it feel if there would be no waiter coming to your table, but a drone hovering over your table, which is quite weird in itself if you experience it, asking you for your wishes, even recognizing your first name if you're back there. What about those drones looking a bit more futuristic, a bit more like an actual robot or a spaceship, equipped with the stuff that you need? What about bartenders that actually pour you a drink? And yes, that is Rolf Pfeifer's face in there.
It looks like me, huh?
But those bartenders that can actually do things a real bartender does. They will pour you a drink, they will give you your drink, they'll crack dirty jokes, they will recognize you. So they will have a social interaction, but they also have a very meaningful physical interaction. And now, honestly, if we really think about it, what could be more meaningful than getting handed a fresh beer? So this is again another impression of a bar. And I'll come to the concept of that later on. But we also want to look at features like this. Now, we've got many very, very controversial comments on just an image like this because people feel repelled by it. You know, this is a security robot, it's violent, yes. But when robots really become a part of our society has criminals, it has violence, and if you ever have been working at a nightclub or a bar, they all have security, they all have bouncers because it's necessary. But when we live in a world with robots, do we want to interact with robotics with a security that's a robot? How do we interact with that? How will it treat us? So there is a lot of very deep emotions in people out there that want to be exploited. And also there is the old topic of the uncanny valley. How will it be when we really interact with androids, but not in a safe frame of an experiment, but really in an everyday situation? Will it be interesting? And will it be interesting after 2 weeks? Will people love it? Or will it wane out? Now, going back to what we're doing here, the interesting thing is in this setting, the customer can actually judge for himself. And the industry collects valuable feedback and first-hand input before designing mass market products that are probably the wrong direction or that may fail. So the robots in the Robo-Lounge, I mean, as we've just shown, robotics is very far, but not that far. So how do we want to achieve that? Well, there's quite some tricks to that. Number one, these are going to be professional products made for public use, but they're not made for the household. We're going to use a lot of tricks like scaffolding, which we're going to explain later, and clear tasks. Those are not going to be the Swiss knives that can do everything. But they are made for one task, and a bartender robot can pour beer with today's technology. It can recognize your face, and it is safe behind his bar, which is his scaffolding, so he can fulfill his task meaningful and satisfying. By not going onto a consumer market and mass producing 10 million things for 100 billion euros, we actually relieve those robots of this enormous pressure that we also see in the media to create a cheap consumer mass product in the first place. So this is really going to be a testing ground and a predecessor of possible later mass products. So in the end, we're looking at creating a research lab of true human-robot interaction, non-guided, in an everyday situation.
Okay, so I think there are a number of very interesting features that go with the Robo-Lounge. For me, very important. You know, I get asked a lot from journalists, from the media, what's the future of robotics going to be like? And then I typically answer, like Niels Bohr, you know, the famous physicist, said, it's hard to predict, especially the future. So what we want to do is not talk about the future or show videos about the future, but we want to provide a venue, a place where people can experience the future. So we bring the future into the present. We get the public to get used to robots. And I think the Robo Lounge also has high educational value because we demonstrate the current state of the art, what can the robots do, but also what the limitations of these robots are. And I think they just have a great show effect. I hope we can show you some of that a bit later. And last but not least, but very important, it's just a lot of fun. Now, the Robo Lounge obviously is a very big project. It's a big endeavor. And the question is, how do we get there?
Yes, and as my colleague said, the path to that is very difficult and very stony. And obviously we can't do that alone. So we're definitely looking at partners in the industry from the robotic industry who are interested in contributing to that. But because we are not satisfied just dreaming and we're more about doing, we are already forming a production company for what we call show-enhanced intelligence robots. Now, what is show-enhanced intelligence? I will show you that a bit later on, but the idea is that it's not about the intelligence itself, but it's about the perception of intelligence. And there's many things that even we humans do that make the other person believe that we're a lot more intelligent or that we're listening or understanding, whereas in fact it's very automatic. Looking at the bartender of the archetype of a meaningful manipulative task and social interaction, we're planning as a first endeavor to build such a bartender, and the little guy you see here is just our little beta test of one of the aspects, but we'll do that later on. Now this bartender is using all of our principles in unison. It has a scaffolding. It's behind a bar, it is hard to touch it, it cannot hurt you because it's constrained, it has a limited movement, so we can move it via tracks. It has a number of tasks, but the number is well defined and limited, and it has a social interaction, but also that social interaction is limited. I don't know about you, but I've never done long philosophical discussions. I've mainly bought a beer and maybe cracked a joke or two, but the expectation towards this specific task is limited and thus gets a lot more fulfillable. And by doing that, we actually bring a first physical and social interaction into public space. People can see it, people can draw their conclusions from it, and we get the experience of it. So we really want to give the public now a tangible and satisfying experience in encountering those robots, because we try to come closer to the image that they have from the media, but at the same time adjust this picture they have in mind to the current reality. And we're going to illustrate one principle that leads us to this guy here, because interaction robots that really serve you in public probably cannot be done in the classical way. They need a couple of new principles, and that's where your knowledge comes in.
Okay, here is about soft robotics. Now, initially I talked about manufacturing robots, which you can see on the left. This is from a Toyota factory, welding robots. So they're made of hard materials, steel, hard plastics, and electrical motors. By contrast, human beings are made 85% of soft materials. So the weight of the human skeletal system is less than 15% of the total body weight. And the very reason why humans have these enormous sensory motor abilities, manipulation, locomotion, movement, is because we are built of mostly of soft materials. So if we ever want to build robots that have even nearly the abilities of humans, they cannot be hard materials. That's a dead end, you know. We cannot use this track. We have to use soft robots, and that's what soft robotics is all about. So basically it means literally soft to touch. You know, humans also, you know, soft tissue in the face and on the skin, soft, smooth interaction with humans. And one important fact is that often control can be outsourced to the materials. And this we are going to illustrate next. We also talk about exploitation of soft materials, and the idea is to outsource what used to be the task of the controller to the periphery and to the material properties of the system. Let me just briefly explain this. So the thimbles experiment, what are thimbles? Okay, well, let me just use this. So if I hold, holding a glass like this, here's a glass. There's no champagne in it, but hopefully later on, we're going to have glasses with champagne, and everyone can hold a glass like that without effort, right? What are you talking about? Well, what's happening here is that I don't even need to know the exact shape of the glass. I can, grasp it with closing my eyes. My finger will automatically wrap around it, but I don't need to control it from here. Also, because we have soft, deformable tissue in the hand and on the fingertips, the tissue will flatten out here and adapt to the shape of the glass, thereby increasing the contact surface. And because the skin is always a bit humid, it has the right frictional characteristics to hold the glass. So I tried to illustrate this with a short video. So, okay, very easy. So it's very easy, right? So now imagine that I actually put thimbles on all the fingers. Well, let me just briefly do that. So thimbles are these things that people used to put on when they were sewing to protect the fingers, right? Okay, now I'm putting on the thimbles, and watch this. Let me, maybe, can I play this again? Well, it's okay. I don't need to play this again. So let me see. This, and when you do this, maybe we can have, maybe we should start the demonstration.
No, try it first.
Okay, so now he is holding the glass, and I have these thimbles on the finger, so I'm basically like a robot built from hard materials, if you like, and I'm trying to grasp the glass, and what's happening? It's gone. It's virtually impossible. Afterwards, during the break, you can actually try it. It's virtually impossible. And then you start realizing what the materials do for you. And that's what we call the power of materials.
So we're going to show you one little... Oh, that's better. Are we ready? I'm going to show you one little thing. This is a very stupid first prototype that we built. It is stupid in the way that it has no real control. It has no clue what it's doing.
By the way, we built this in 2 months.
Yeah. And it's a tendon-driven system. And you see that it's holding this glass with no effort. And this hand is probably the most stupid robot in this whole hall. Why? You want to hand it to me back? Thank you. Now, why is it stupid? Because the actuators are stepper motors. They just turn. That's it. They have no force feedback. They have no idea what object they're holding. But yet, because of the material that we're using, it can actually hold the glass. Now, because why are we doing this as our first little prototype and experiment? Quite simple. A bartender has to manage glasses. And if you know a little bit about beer, most beer companies get new glasses for new seasons. They get special beer glass shapes for different beer types. So you don't want to sit there and reprogram a robot for a whiskey glass, a beer glass, and whatever. You just can't do that. You want to have a bartender that can handle any type of object. But also you don't want the bartender to crush the glass. And Rolf, can you give me that coffee thing there, please?
Yes, sure.
So another thing is industrial robots need to have a force feedback when they handle delicate objects. Okay. And these, I'm sorry.
You ruined
give me
it.
another one.
Okay.
You see, it's very delicate. But what if we have to handle really delicate objects? I mean, this thing is closing much further than this cup, actually. But the cup doesn't give a shit, to be honest. It's not even denting. And why is that so? Well, this hand not only has a soft material on the outside, but it also has no joints. It has no mechanical structure. It has no hard skeleton. It has a soft skeleton. It has tendons. It has no actuators, and it's absolutely soft. You could even bend the fingers open. So if you want to see this coffee cup, is it dented in any way?
Still in good shape, huh? And now the cigarette.
So, talking a little bit about this prototype, I think I've said most of the things already. One interesting aspect is also, as Dr. Pfeifer said, we are distributing the task that normally a huge control would do, force feedback, optical feedback, whatever kind of, sensory motor loops were necessary. What we've done is we have two very stupid motors and an I/O that goes open, close. That's it. You could replace those motors with pneumatics, with whatever, with a slave that's pulling, it doesn't matter. The intelligence is only in the material. And yeah, I think I've said it all, so I think I can have a smoke now.
Hey, stop. What? Maybe the robot wants to have a smoke.
You think so?
Yes.
I don't know. Yep. It probably likes it. And as you can see, the robot has the robot has no clue whether it's smoking or having a drink or, don't do that. And I mean, some of you may be smokers as well. Can I have my cigarette back? Thank you. And if you look at this cigarette, I mean, a cigarette is very delicate, and this cigarette is actually not even dented, even though it was safely held. And as you see, these are wobbly. But they have enough force to hold any kind of object. So that was our brief introduction on our vision of a RoboLounge and of our path to get there. And I hope we could entertain you a little bit with this.
And this is the last slide. We invite you all to actually have a drink with us, humans. Maybe in the future you can have a drink with robots in the RoboLounge. Thank you very much for your attention. Oh shit, what a mess. What a mess here. Watch the the broken glass.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's on now. Thank you very much, Rolf. Thank you very much, Matthias. And thank you very much. I don't know what...
Well, he's going to thank you in his own way.
Thank you. It was really great to see it and to hear it. And thank you very much. And thank you very much to you as well. Oh, thank you very much. Fantastic. For your information, there will be buses out here. There will still be a couple of buses, so go there. I think there's space for 15 each of them, so take you to downtown or to your hotel. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow morning again, where we have Hiroshi Ishiguro on the program from 9 o'clock. Okay? See you. Bye.
Okay, let me just thank also Shangxiao Liu, who has been investing an enormous amount of work, and without him, this wouldn't have been done.
Thank you, Rolf.
Okay, thanks, Shangxiao.